Hey there, everyone. In this lesson, this section of EOI review, we're going to be looking at how America moves away from neutrality towards getting involved in World War II. Now, President Roosevelt, that would be FDR, he knew that most Americans were still very deeply committed to staying out of this war. But he also believed that there could be no peace with these dictators running amok all around the Pacific and in Europe. So he really wanted to revise the Neutrality Act of 1935, and he began to prepare America for the struggle that he very strongly believed was coming up very soon. So what he is going to do is he is going to urge Congress to pass something known as a cash and carry policy. That would be a provision that would allow the United States of America to trade or give weapons to countries that were involved in conflict under one very important set of conditions. That is, they had to pay cash for what they were buying, and they had to transport it away back home on their own ships. Now, this would, of course, help Britain and France in their fight against Hitler, and he hoped it would help keep the United States of America out of the war. Now, the isolationist faction, led by Charles Lindbergh and Ford and people like that, really attacked him for his actions. But after 6 weeks of very intense debate, Congress does revise that with the Neutrality Act of 1939, and this cash carry policy goes into effect. Now, these dictators, we'll just call it the Axis threat. All of this that we do with the cash carry policy, it's going to prove to be way too little, way too late. Because by the summer of 1940, France had already fallen to Hitler, and Britain was, of course, under siege. Just this massive bombardment of the British homeland by the German Luftwaffe. And Roosevelt's going to scramble to find any type of aid that he can get, short of the United States of America getting involved in this war, to Britain. So we start sending them hundreds of thousands of rifles, 80,000 machine guns, and we traded 50 old destroyers to the British military in exchange for leases to use British naval bases in the Caribbean and Newfoundland. Now, I find it very odd, under the terms of this condition, the United States of America still has these, because these were 99-year leases. Then in September, Americans kind of get greeted by this wonderful news. Germany, Italy, and Japan had all signed a mutual defense pact with one another. They became known as the Axis powers. And each of these nations agreed that if one of them came under attack, the others would come to their aid, which meant if the United States of America got involved in a conflict with any of these three countries, we were effectively at war with all of them. And of course, this means we would be facing an ultimate military nightmare, because you'd be fighting a war in Europe and in the Pacific. That's a two-front war. So Congress, as a response to that, has to start increasing our defense spending. And they passed the nation's first ever Peacetime Draft. This would be your Selective Service Act. 16 million men between the ages of 21 and 35 were registered, and 1 million of these men are going to be drafted into the war. Now, under the conditions of this, they could only be used to fight in the Western Hemisphere. So we're really trying very hard to stay out of this conflict. And on the heels of everything that's going on with the Great Depression, you have to keep in mind this was still going on. Roosevelt decides he's going to run for a third term. Now, Wendell Willkie is the Republican candidate running against him. This is an unprecedented third term. This is breaking the tradition that was started by George Washington. No one has ever, prior to this, tried to run for more than 2 terms. And Willkie wasn't really anti-Roosevelt enough. It turns out he agreed that we had to provide aid with Britain. He agreed that he wanted to stay out of this war, but it may not be possible. So in the end, FDR is going to get reelected to an unprecedented third term. he wins 55% of the votes.